My eldest son and his wife will be living with us," my husband said cheerfully as I stood confused by the unexpected arrival of the movers. Next to him, my son's wife wore a malicious smile, while my eldest son seemed perplexed, not understanding the situation. "Old people are just in the way. If you don't like it, leave," my son's wife jeered with distaste. I frowned, displeased by her crude words. My eldest son, looking unsettled, didn't seem like he could be relied upon, and my husband was overly pleased about living with this beautiful daughter-in-law. "Well then, I'll leave," I declared. I instructed the movers to take only my belongings to a different location. My son's wife, smugly triumphant, watched me and then began humming a tune while putting up a tasteless nameplate. "Enjoy it while it lasts," I thought to myself as I left the place alone. My name is Catherine, a proud 71-year-old grandmother. These days, my joy comes from chatting with preschoolers in the park during my walks. My husband, Philip, was my son-in-law. Worried about me being an only child, my dad set up a matchmaking event where we met. Although it wasn't a marriage of passionate love, after nearly 25 years, family bonds had formed, and we had a reasonably happy life. I thought we were heading towards a peaceful retirement, even though our marriage wasn't one of deep infatuation. My son Maury, serious since childhood, and an indoor type who loves books, and surely as the sun rises wasn't much for sports but excelled in studies. Without needing tutoring, he maintained the top grade in his class, graduated from a private high school with honors and a scholarship, and has always been a caring son. Maury married Anita, his junior at the same company. Anita is beautiful, reportedly having won a beauty pageant in college. She indeed looks like a model, with a perfectly proportioned body and a striking face. However, she has a significant flaw: her strong temper. In front of Maury and Philip, she seems to wear a mask, but with me, she turns hostile, scrutinizing me from head to toe and even scoffing. "Catherine, that outfit isn't very feminine, is it? Aren't you embarrassed?" my son's wife sneered. I was about to retort when my eldest son and husband returned, leaving the matter unresolved. Since then, every time I visited, she would find moments to be alone with me to make snide remarks. Initially, I couldn't understand why she would say such awful things, but as we lived separately and she only made these remarks when my son or husband weren't around, I decided not to let it bother me anymore. However, one day, an incident happened that I couldn't ignore. It started with a phone call. "Hello? Hey Mom, just checking. Did you say something strange to Anita?" The caller was my eldest son. I couldn't comprehend what he meant. Me saying something odd to my son's wife? Confused and unable to respond, my son rephrased his question. "Anita's been crying since morning. She said you've been pressuring her every day about when they'll have kids." "What?" I exclaimed in shock. I had never broached the topic of grandchildren, and I didn't even have my daughter-in-law's contact information. When I explained this to my son, he sighed and started to speak. "Actually, there was a problem with our neighbors recently. I only heard Anita's side, saying she was being harassed, but the neighbors claimed Anita was the one harassing them. They even had an audio recording as proof, and I had to take Anita to apologize to them." It seemed Anita's strong temperament had also caused trouble with the neighbors. Moreover, the neighbors were also demanding they move out. My son mentioned that this incident prompted him to accept an overseas assignment he had been considering. He wouldn't return for at least 3 years. 2 months after that call, my son and his wife left for their overseas assignment. Since then, my son only came home during the holiday season. However, it seemed my daughter-in-law returned every month. but she never visited our house. Until one day, she unexpectedly showed up. "Catherine, long time no see. I have something to consult with you." As I led my son's wife into the living room, she quickly started talking, and her words took me by surprise. "I want to start fertility treatments. There's a gynecology clinic nearby, but it's quite expensive. You want to see your grandchild, right?" "That clinic?" I responded in astonishment. My daughter-in-law, tapping her beautifully manicured nails, nodded. The clinic she mentioned was a well-known luxury clinic in the area, rumored to be frequented by celebrities. Consequently, the treatment costs were several times higher than other hospitals. "Do you really need to go to that hospital for fertility treatments? Besides, didn't you say you didn't want children?" I confronted my son's wife with something my eldest son had mentioned before. She had set a condition before getting married. She would agree to marry only if they decided not to have children. My son, who loves children, seemed troubled by this, but still wanted to marry her. To my words, my son's wife casually replied, "People change their minds all the time, don't they?" "I suppose, but—" I couldn't agree, and my daughter-in-law mistook my hesitation as reluctance to provide money. Her mood turned sour, and she started fidgeting with her hair. "You want grandchildren too, don't you, Catherine? Since he's your only son? If you don't help, then forget about seeing your grandchild. Besides, Maury might end up single again." I was shocked by her insinuation of divorce, knowing if they did divorce, she would likely spread falsehoods to paint my son as the bad guy. My kind-hearted son would get hurt, and depending on the lies she spread, he might even resent us. I felt my blood run cold. "All right, I'll provide the money." "Yay! Thank you, Catherine. I'll come to collect it every time I return from overseas. Maury doesn't like to get involved, so let's keep this between us." She took $500 from me, claiming it was for today's share, and left cheerfully. I told my husband about it, but he, believing his daughter-in-law to be a good person, didn't believe me. He was just happy at the prospect of having a grandchild. Since then, every month, my daughter-in-law demanded money for her medical bills, claiming they were for fertility treatments. The cost, initially $500, gradually increased to $1,000, then $2,000. I doubted whether it really cost that much, but she would explain with technical terms about microscopes and tests, convincing me because it was a high-end clinic. After a year of this, she still wasn't pregnant. I didn't dare ask about her progress, fearing her displeasure, so I kept paying as she requested. Then we received news that my son would return to the country. They were considering moving near our house. "Hey, how about we move?" My husband suggested this a week after we heard from our eldest son. In his hand was a flyer for a newly built single-family home about 15 minutes by car from our place. "It's time for repairs on this house, right? We're getting old, and this house isn't elderly-friendly. Maybe it's better to move than repair." Indeed, our house was nearly 70 years old, with steep stairs and increasingly difficult maintenance. My husband had already had it appraised, and due to its good location and size, it was worth a considerable amount. The flyer's house looked a bit too cute, but otherwise, the layout was lovely, and it would be a suitable inheritance for my son. We decided to buy it and move there. With our minimalistic lifestyle, moving wasn't too difficult. Coincidentally, the day of our move was also when my eldest son and his wife were returning home, so they came to help. On the moving day, as we met with my son and his wife and arrived at the new house, the movers we hired were waiting at the entrance. However, there was another moving company already going in and out of the house. Seeing this, my husband turned to me with a cheerful smile and said, Our eldest son and his wife will be living with us." Confused by the unexpected move in company, I was taken aback by my husband's happy announcement. Next to him, my son's wife smirked unpleasantly. My son looked confused, not understanding the situation. "Old people are just in the way. If you don't like it, leave." My daughter-in-law said rudely. I frowned, feeling displeased. My son, looking unsettled, didn't seem reliable, and my husband was delighted about living with his beautiful daughter-in-law. "Well then, I'll leave," I said. I instructed the movers to take only my belongings to a different location. My daughter-in-law watched me with a triumphant look, then began humming and attaching a tasteless nameplate. "Enjoy it while it lasts," I thought to myself as I left the place alone. After that, I stayed in a hotel and made various arrangements. It took a month from the day I was kicked out by my daughter-in-law to finalize everything. During that time, there was no contact from my son, husband, or daughter-in-law. However, on the day I was to receive my new house for living alone, I got a call from my daughter-in-law. Initially, I ignored it, but she persistently kept calling. Reluctantly, I answered the phone. She seemed panicked and started talking without any greetings. "Catherine, I need to ask you something." "Oh, what's up?" It seemed that my daughter-in-law had finally realized something. I asked her, barely suppressing a laugh in response to her panicked voice. "The house!" She started, then paused. Although she had realized the truth, she seemed unable to comprehend it. "The house?" I prompted. Swallowing nervously, she finally spoke. "That house wasn't Catherine's name?" Hearing her words, I burst out laughing. My laughter confirmed for my daughter-in-law that what she feared was true. "I heard there's still a mortgage and we can't pay for such a high one," she stammered. "Oh, it shouldn't be that high," I replied. In reality, our old house sold for only 2/3 of the new one's price, so we took out a mortgage for the rest. This was possible because I had some passive income, but my proud husband probably hadn't mentioned this to her. However, the remaining mortgage was only 1/3 of the price, less than $1,000 a month, which my son, now promoted after his overseas assignment, should be able to afford. Nevertheless, I cheerfully confronted her about her inability to pay. "Well, it can't be helped, right? You're strapped for cash because of all the debt." "Why would you say that?" she exclaimed over the phone, causing my ears to twitch. Reluctantly, I switched the phone to speaker and continued. "I did some checking. You kept increasing the amount you asked for. I heard a friend's daughter is getting treatment at the same clinic, and I found out they now accept insurance." It's different. I'm not covered by insurance. The debt is for that." She interrupted with excuses, which I laughed off. She seemed puzzled and stopped talking. "Strange, isn't it? I checked with the clinic. They told me they don't offer any treatments not covered by insurance." "Oh," she exclaimed softly, but I kept talking. "I've been looking into your affairs this past month, and what I found was astonishing. I've never been so surprised." "What? You checked? Wait, please." She desperately tried to interrupt. Clearly, she had something she didn't want me to say, but I delivered the final blow. My money was being spent on male staff at a club, wasn't it? The other end of the phone went silent. All I could hear was her ragged breathing as she scrambled for an excuse. "By the way, I sent those documents to Maury's company. He must be receiving them about now." "No way!" she screamed, just as I heard the sound of the front door opening, followed by noisy footsteps approaching.
Hey, what's this all about?
Maury? It seemed my son had already received and seen the contents of what I had sent. I could hear his angry voice from the other end of the line. I hung up on my daughter-in-law and texted my son. I asked for a meeting and requested that he bring his wife and my husband. After a while, Maury sent me an apology and the details for the meeting. I decided to attend the meeting with the lawyer. On the day when I arrived at the venue, my eldest son and his wife, along with my husband, were already there. My husband was as arrogant as ever, and my daughter-in-law seemed sulky. I sat across from them with my lawyer.
First, Mom, I'm truly sorry for everything. I had no idea Anita had been taking money from you. I know an apology isn't enough, but please, allow me to say it. I am sorry.
My son began offering his apologies. His wife looked out the window, disinterested. As I was about to respond to my son, my husband interrupted.
Maury, there's no need to apologize to a woman. Catherine, you left your husband's care to his wife and got yourself a good deal. You have nowhere else to go, so just come back.
Yeah, Catherine, let's live together. You should listen to what your husband says. My daughter-in-law, emboldened by my husband's words, made a bold statement. My son immediately reprimanded her, but she didn't seem interested in listening. I sighed and responded to both my husband and son. Firstly, Philip, I cannot continue with you. I don't need a husband who disregards his loyal wife for superficial beauty. And Anita, did you forget I have evidence against you? She looked regretful. My husband then smugly said to me,
You think you can divorce? I won't give you property distribution, nor inheritance. Enjoy your lonely retirement. Ha!
I was beyond appalled at his words and felt pity for him. He seemed to think he had won. Sitting back, relaxed, I sighed deeply and responded, You seem to have forgotten. I didn't marry you. You came as a son-in-law, and the inherited land and cash, it's all mine. What? It was my daughter-in-law who was surprised, not my husband, who now looked uncomfortable. I glanced at him and continued, I have evidence of your infidelity. I could ask for compensation in the divorce, but I am willing to consider a divorce without property distribution. This was my true intention. My husband, over 80 and recently attending medical appointments for his leg, wouldn't be able to work and pay for the divorce compensation. I laid out the evidence of his infidelity on the table. He turned pale and fell silent. I don't know what you told Anita, but the house and passive income are all in my name, and there's never been anything in yours. Don't be mistaken. My husband, crestfallen, and my daughter-in-law, pale with disbelief, were reeling from my onslaught. She began speaking with a look of disbelief. So, about owning apartments and stocks? That's me, I interjected. No way, Philip! What do you mean? You said if we lived together, you'd buy anything I wanted, and Catherine would handle all the chores. Liar! She yelled at my husband, her face ashen. My husband just hung his head unresponsive to her outcry. Annoyed, she scratched her head, and then looked at me with a sly smile. Catherine, I'm sorry for everything. I was deceived by Philip. So, let's kick him out and live together. Just the three of us? Her sudden shift to playing the victim almost impressed me, but I was not going to let it slide. I looked her straight in the eye and laid photos in front of my son and his wife. She gasped loudly. Oh! These are the evidence I forgot to include for Maury. Anita, not only are you infatuated with the club staff, but you also seem very friendly with a much younger man. Well, this is not exactly... She stuttered, trying to hide the photos and make excuses, but couldn't find the right words. And no wonder. The photo showed her handling money to a clearly younger man in front of a hotel, using the same envelope I had given her for her fertility treatments. The money I had given her was being used for outings with club staff and supporting her young lover.
Anita, it wasn't just the club visits, huh? If you like young men that much, you can go to them. I promise to live happily with you, even without kids.
Maury stopped, holding back anger and sadness, his body trembling slightly. Then, taking a deep breath, he firmly said to his wife,
Let's divorce.
"No, Maury, I'm sorry. It was just a fling. You're the one I love. I love only you." She blurted out typical excuses of someone caught cheating. Desperately clinging to my son, she tried to make him retract the divorce, but he remained unresponsive and she burst into tears. I delivered the final blow to them. "The divorce between you two is secondary. I have two things to communicate. First, I am divorcing Philip. In lieu of alimony, we'll forego distribution of property, and I'll keep everything. Second, regarding the new house you're living in, I found a buyer recently, so please vacate by the end of this month." My words left my son, his wife, and my husband pale, beyond shock. I left the meeting, leaving them behind. Later, I submitted the divorce papers signed by my husband to the family court. The divorce was finalized smoothly. My husband, with little savings and a modest pension, moved into a rundown apartment. Known in the neighborhood for its foul smell, he is now shunned by those around him. My son also divorced shortly after, as he informed me, though he was somewhat unreliable when I was ousted. Considering his prompt apology and his growth in standing up to his assertive ex-wife, I decided not to cut ties with him entirely. However, I won't dote on him as before. We live separately but meet occasionally. My ex-daughter-in-law, without funds for lavish spending and abandoned by the young man, continued her club visits, racking up debts. Unable to maintain her appearance, she's now seen as a problem at the clubs. When I saw her on the street once, she looked utterly disheveled and far cry from her former self. My son mentioned she lives in a bathless apartment, working daily to pay off debts, but still increasing them due to her clubbing, leading to a life of cutting back on food expenses. He ignores her occasional attempts to reconcile. As for me, I initially lived in one of my apartments, but realizing I needed support in case of emergencies, I moved into an assisted living facility. Thanks to my passive income, my life here is very comfortable. Recently, I've been talking to a man living in the same facility, feeling a bit of butterflies in my stomach. We've planned to chat under the cherry blossoms in the garden this spring. I look forward to cherishing these warm days.